It's the Big Fat American Show. I'm Zach Martin, along with a special guest. I've known him a long time. He is, you might say, a guiding force behind many greats. David Salidor, welcome to the Big Fat American Studios. And what we want to do today is talk about your rock and roll bio. A lot of times you never get to hear from the public relations guy, the PR guy, the A&E guy, as they call him, right? Arts and what is
the
that?
Mouthpiece.
AR guy, that's what I'm thinking. The mouthpiece, the guy who comes up with all the press releases. So people that are listening to this now, David, are probably a variety of people from all different backgrounds, all types of experiences. You get some famous people, some not so famous people. Some people are on their way up. Some people want to do what you do for a living. Some people want to do what I do for a living. But before we talk about the nuts and bolts about what you do and the people that you work with, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of a background of David growing up, your rock and roll bio.
Okay. First off, nice to be here. Nice to see you. I guess you could say I've gone into the family business. My father basically did what I'm doing. So I guess you can say I'm doing what he's doing. My mother owned a record store in Maryland, and they met in the record store. Of all places, Maryland.
Right.
I was born in Philadelphia. We relocated to Long Island. And, I grew up in the 60s, very kind of turbulent time. If you didn't live through it, it's kind of hard to relate to it now, although anything's possible now. I keep reading about Iran, so who knows? But kids back then didn't want to do what their parents did.
Right.
I don't know why. If they didn't like their parents or whatever. I wasn't a huge music fan. I got along with my mother great. I didn't get along with my father. My father worked for Decca Records, which in the 50s was the number 1 or 2 record label. I mean, they had Brenda Lee, and they had Earl Grant, and they had Buddy Holly and the Comets. One afternoon in 1967, my father said to me, I got to go see this band in Long Beach. We lived in Baldwin, Long Island, South Shore. Do you want to go with me? I said, sure. I got dressed. We got in the car. We went to the Lido Beach Club. The band turned out to be The Who.
Wow.
Keith Moon, Pete Townsend, Roger Daltrey, John Entwistle. I watched them, and something happened. I knew then I wanted to be in this business. It didn't happen immediately. I did stuff for my father. I did tons of freelance writing. Freelance writing back then, you did something. If they used it, you got paid. Most of the stuff you did, you didn't get paid for. But it was a tremendous learning experience.
Well, that's cool. What were some of the songs that you remember from your first show? Performed by The Who.
Magic Bus.
Oh, that's
they
a great
had just
song.
come out with their first album.
Yeah.
So I knew the songs, from that album. I think Substitute. This is going back a long way.
Well, it's fine,
1967.
It's good that you can remember it.
Yeah.
No. And did you go out after the show and buy all the Who records you could find at the record store?
My father had brought them home because they were on Decca Records.
Yeah.
So he was basically going out, what I do now, supporting your act, meeting the media, although I don't know who the heck was in Long Beach, Long Island at that point. Newsday is the big paper out there, and a lot of the radio stations, which were big back then, WLIR. I don't know if WLIR
No,
was
I don't think they were around then. That
No.
came in the 70s. Now, you grew up in the 60s.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 70s, and I was talking about this earlier today.
Right.
The difference.
Right.
Everything today seems to be well-regulated. Right? Special laws, protect helmet laws when you ride around your bicycle. Everybody makes sure that, for the most part, they get their vaccines. They go for wellness checkups on a regular basis. Everybody's got insurance for the most part, right? When I was growing up in the 70s, we had none of that.
Right.
You got maybe 4 vaccines, all right? We had no helmets to put on to wear to drive around our bikes, right? To ride around on our bikes. And if you did have a helmet, the other kids in the group would start to hit it with a stick to see how well it would work. We had our baseball cards. We chew gum. We shared the same glass. We'd go out and play in the dirt. We'd play until Mom would scream out the door, "It's time for dinner, Zach, come home. It's time for dinner. 5 more minutes, Mom." We did that kind of stuff. It was turbulent as well politically. The music was very interesting, you might say. We didn't have that many channels to choose from as far as TV. We go home around 4 o'clock, right? Put on your after-school clothes. You'd watch Batman, Superman, maybe The Little Rascals, and the various other shows that were popular back in the 60s that you could watch on Channel 9, Channel 11, the Vincent Price movies, the movie of the week, those kind of things.
Officer Joe Bolton. Remember him?
Officer Joe Bolton. And you had Wonderama, Wackadoo, Wackadoo, Wackadoo.
Sonny Fox.
And then you had, even younger, remember Romper Room?
Yep.
I used to get upset that, I guess it was Miss Julie, maybe? I don't know her name. She would never say my name. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is the 60s, the 70s, when you think about what the kids are going through today, I feel sorry for them.
Right.
Now people would get bullied. They have no idea how to deal with the bully. When I was in the 70s, if I got bullied too much, it resulted in meet you after school. You got in a fight. It didn't matter whether it was a loss, win, or draw. You fought it out, and then you moved on from that point. So when I think about the 60s and the 70s, it was a lot of fun. And your first concert, Who, in Long Island, and you remember some of the songs. Take us to the point when you decided, okay, I am really going to become a public relations guy. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm not going to go into radio, even though that would have been cool. David Salidor, am going to go into PR.
Well, it's funny. Everything you just said, I mean, Officer Joe Bolton on down. Kids today, I don't know. I know you have a daughter. My daughter just turned 28. I remember walking into her room.
I remember when she was 8.
She had the TV on. She was on her phone. She had the computer going. There's just so much more things to do. I think growing up, I mean, we didn't have a lot to do. I do remember going out on my bike and just, biking around for hours with no particular
place to go.
Place to go.
Yeah.
And the Who concert, just to go back to that, I think the show, just their performance. I mean, Pete Townsend smashing his guitar, Keith Moon smashing his drums. I don't really remember the content, but I mean, I had never seen anyone do that before.
Right.
I was just, and they were playing around the swimming pool.
And they knew how to entertain.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah, they were entertainers. I did stuff for my father. I mean, I wrote for the high school paper. I wrote for the college paper. I worked for, WLIR, although I might have that, up in my mind too much. There was a club out there, the famous My Father's Place. No, it was not My Father's Place.
It was called My Father's Place.
It was called My Father's Place. If you don't know it, the answer I get is, your father had a place?
Right.
I did sound. I was the stage manager. And that kind of culminated in me saying, I want to get into the record business. My first job, believe it or not, was for London Records, which at that time had the Rolling Stones.
Oh, my gosh.
The Moody Blues, Al Green. That was my first entrance.
Well, you must have been hit with the ladies with Al Green records.
Well, I had always liked Al Green, but I remember my very first day, I took all the Al Green vinyl.
Yeah.
I took all the Moody Blues vinyl.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I wasn't a huge Stones fan back then. I was more of a Beatles guy, but I did take a lot of the vinyl. And I was actually in the creative services department, which did a little promotion, did a little radio, did a little PR. I was actually in the union. So I had to be there at 9 a.m. and I could not work past 5 p.m.
Now, what union would that be?
Back then, some of the employees were unionized. My department tried to get me out of the union because, if I was there past 5, I couldn't collect,
You get the double time and a half kind of a deal with the union.
Yeah.
I
mean, I had to go to the meetings. I mean, it was just.
What was it? Was it the Writers Guild? I mean, I'm really interested.
Honestly, I mean, this is, the the late 70s. I have no idea.
So David was a Teamster, we'll just call it that, and he worked at my father's place.
But I constantly got into fights, well, not fights, but arguments with the union steward who was there.
Oh, the shop steward, yeah.
Shop steward.
Yeah.
And, you can't stay past 5 o'clock. But what I did, I mean, writers back then worked all hours of the night. So I was even working from my home.
Yeah, I get it. When you tell somebody to write, go back to school.
Yeah.
I want you to do 500 words on such and such subject. And I'm like, why do you put any limitation on the words? Just let me write about it and I'll do it.
I guess I wasn't a union guy back then. I'm not a union guy now. My office is not unionized. But I mean, I get it. I think I just didn't understand it.
Well, hey, to each his own, right? De gustibus non est disputandum.
Yes.
You heard me say that before, and I'll say it again. De gustibus non est disputandum, which means taste is not to be argued.
From there,
yeah,
I worked for this fellow, Howard
Bloom, right?
Who in the 80s had the #1 PR shop in the country. I mean, he had Billy Joel, and he had the Stones, and he had Hall & Oates.
And ZZ Top.
ZZ Top.
Right.
And I had 22 accounts.
22?
And I knew at that time it was too many accounts.
Right.
But out of those 22 accounts, I really got behind 6 of them. And I mean, which ones do you think got all those 6?
Well, I would go for Hall & Oates and ZZ Top. And later on, Debbie Gibson, of course, right?
Well, Debbie Gibson, I started my company in 1984, after that, and I shared an office with Howard, and my reasoning was, everyone said it was a bad idea, but I just picked up, I heard
the
him.
overflow. Yeah, I get it. No, that's a brilliant idea.
It was intense, though, because he was the type of guy at the end of the day, he would have and just pass out. Interesting guy.
Drink,
yeah.
or drink.
I left there. I went to Z Records. I don't know if you ever heard of Z Records, but they were an avant-garde label. One of the first new wave, no wave. We had Lydia Lunch, Kid Creole and the Coconuts, Suicide.
You're starting to sound like Ralph Cramden when he talks about the Italian acts over at the little Italy Hall, whatever it's called.
After that, I started my own company in 1984. Okay.
And so what was your first big profile client?
Well, interestingly enough, it was from a great label back then called Profile Records. I was introduced my second week of running my company to this rap group, Run DMC.
Oh.
Honestly, I didn't quite get it, but when I jump on a project...
Oh, you go all in, baby.
Well,
you do.
Gradually. They were nice guys. They were from Hollis, Queens.
I
was from Baldwin.
One of them went to St. John's.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. I was at St. John's at the time when our Run DMC was just breaking out. You were still working. I'm a little bit younger than you.
Right.
So that's my college days.
Right.
Where we're listening to LIR.
Right.
We have Run DMC. And the legend on the campus was like one of our own made it. That was what was going on. So,
I mean, they were very nice, but my lifestyle was clearly different than their lifestyle.
Oh, do you think?
And it was, it was a kind of coming together. I mean, I'm not going to get into specifics, but let's just say it took some time. But when their first song, It's Like That, it hit big. We got them on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Nice.
I think the first rap act ever on the cover of Rolling Stone. I'm talking about Jan Wenner's Rolling Stone, not what is Rolling Stone today. I don't even know what it is.
Well, just to take a little break, I have on this
good article on Willie Nelson.
Yeah, he's smoking pot on the cover. Yeah. My criticism to Rolling Stone is they've kind of left music behind and they get too political all the time. And, I have enough of, here you go. Here's an example.
Right.
I don't need to read this crap. I get enough of it from television and other sources.
Right.
And I'm kind of disappointed because it's one-sided politically. And I think it should always be balanced.
Right.
If you want to maintain integrity. But,
the owners, they own, Deadline Hollywood. They own a bunch of media-oriented publications.
Yeah.
And, that's what they're trying to do with Rolling Stone. I mean, from what I understand, Jan Wenner is essentially out of it, even though...
They use the name and whatever. But I would say that if you're listening right now, David Salidor is with us, great public relations guy, owns his own boutique agency. I like the NME, which you are familiar with. I like Classic Rock Magazine. I like what's going on in England as far as music. So it's back to where it started all over again for me. Things from England and British Biscuits. But yeah, so Run DMC, they end up doing this hit, this crossover with Aerosmith, Walk This Way. When you saw that, what was your immediate impression?
Well, I had always liked the song, and I think it was actually Rick Rubin's idea to get the song and to get Aerosmith. Rick Rubin,
yes, we all know
out
Rick
of
Rubin,
NYU,
who loves WWE wrestling. This guy's amazing. So you ended up working with Rick Rubin over the years.
Well, I met him a handful of times. I really worked with Russell Simmons, which is a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Rick Rubin, very quiet, very focused, I guess. He came alive in the studio. I was not at the sessions for that particular recording. But, I mean, they came up with something, in my opinion, totally unique.
Oh, I thought it was great. And they killed two birds with one stone because Aerosmith was really floundering. Right. They weren't getting along. And so Run DMC, they remake Walk This Way. And next thing you know, Aerosmith has Permanent Vacation, I think. It was
like a resurgence.
Yeah, resurgence.
Right?
And they had Desmond Child, I think, was in the mix. I don't know if Rick Rubin, I can't remember who produced the album, but I will say this, that it's a great album, and then, they've been hotter than pepper pudding ever since. Right. Aerosmith is a lot of fun.
I always liked Aerosmith.
Me too.
I mean, they worked with Jack Douglas, too, who, did Double Fantasy. I mean, there's a lot of connective tissue.
You know what I always liked about Aerosmith is their variety of sound. They weren't the same old. I'm not going to mention any groups by name because I don't think it's. If I don't have anything nice to say at this point, I'm not going to say it. But there's some bands that all right, it's another blah 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 record from who, and sounds the same, just different lyrics. Same kind of formula. I like the fact that they would mix it up a little bit. Over the years, did you ever find yourself in a situation as a PR guy where, wow, this is going to be a tough situation for me to handle? Or I can't believe I'm in the room while this is going on. You have any good stories like that to share?
Well, the first story that comes to mind is with Debbie Gibson, who I met Debbie in 1985. I'm not working with her right now, but we're ironically in touch more than ever. She's on the mixtape tour with New Kids on the Block.
It's great.
Salt and Pepper, Naughty by Nature, and Tiffany. I had taken her to see Elton at the Garden.
What year was this? 84, 85?
Probably like around 87 or 88. Billy Joel was there, her idol. She couldn't believe it. And Elton invited them both to come out and do the encore. Lucy and the Sky with Diamonds.
Are you kidding me?
And I was standing on the stage with her mother, who was her manager.
Yeah.
That's another show, too. And, I mean, we had tears in our eyes. It was just...
does it get any better than that?
No.
You're doing the song that Dr. Winston O'Boogie performed with Elton John in the 70s. Right. So now you're with Billy Joel and Debbie Gibson.
Right.
They're on stage.
Right.
You're on the side of stage. Right. And we got this movie, this biopic about Elton John coming out called Rocket Man. I haven't seen it. I haven't previewed it. I'm looking forward to it, I guess. I'm the kind of guy that's going to wait until it comes on Netflix or... I can get the DVD and then I'll go see it. But when you think about Rocket Man, you think about Elton John and that Dodgers uniform, all the glitter, and you're standing, and you go back in time where you're with Debbie Gibson, Billy Joel, and Elton John. What was Elton John really like?
Well, I've actually known him for quite a few years, and just a terrific person. I mean, he can talk about Tears for Fears. He can talk about Greta Van Fleet. Just totally knowledgeable about music. If he was not a performer, not a writer, he would probably be doing PR.
Probably be Zach Martin.
Probably.
I doubt it.
I wanted to say something, and it kind of went in and went out of my head.
All right, but it'll come back when you least expect it. But back on Elton.
All things must pass. Oh, Rocket Man.
Yeah.
Debuted in Cannes yesterday to a standing ovation. The early reviews from, the Hollywood Reporter. Brilliant. Brilliant. They said this kid, Taron Egerton, is phenomenal.
Well,
I saw the trailers.
See,
when he's at the Troubadour in the movie, he does Benny and the Jets, which was written 10 years later. So to me, like with the Queen
movie, Bohemian Rhapsody, they took some license.
Because, I lived through it.
Right.
I always tell people when they say, well, what'd you think? I'm the worst critic because I'm too critical.
Yeah, no, you've done PR work for me in the past, and you tell the truth. Yeah. That's the way it is. You let people know.
When I watch a movie now, I look at a great shot, and I think, I wonder where they put the camera to get that shot. And it kind of takes away from...
All right, well, when I listen to the radio, if I hear dead air, it's the same kind of thing. I do critically listen to things. I also have mixed albums in my career, so I do listen to things like a producer would listen to them. So, yeah, I'm with you on that.
I have a dead air question for you.
All right, go ahead.
When I'm sitting in my office and I'm listening to a station, I won't mention the station, and I hear dead air. Yeah. Is it pilot error? Is it the CD?
I think it's just... it's a system failure. We'll leave it at that. That means that there's not enough people paying attention.
Right. Quality control.
Quality control is probably not where it used to be. Also, I think a lot of disc jockeys have a tendency to put in an automation so that they don't have to pay attention to the segues and the things that happen between the records. And they're on the phone or they're having conversation and they turn the monitor down. People be surprised how we don't even listen to a lot of this stuff we play anymore. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to tell you a funny story. When I was on my college radio station, I was the music director at one point, and I was an on-air DJ. Mm-hmm. I put on a side of Pink Floyd, and I'd go out and, liberate myself.
Right. I was just talking about this. There was always the long record we'd have to put on to go to the bathroom.
That's how I got into Pink Floyd.
Listen, I joke about that because I can remember many times being on the air, playing Pink Floyd from the LP Dark Side of the Moon, and not knowing when to stop the cut. It goes breathe, speak, breathe into whatever, turning whatever the heck the next track
at
is.
CW Post, the radio station was in a standalone, or at least it was at that time, structure. So I could literally, and I wasn't the only one, put on a record,
go
look
have
at the
lunch,
dials,
come back.
and,
I get it.
Come back and 15 minutes.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. And a Gata DeVita was always the long one when you needed a Imodium. We'll just put it at joke. Anyway, so moving right along.
Right.
You know Elton John. Did he ever confide in you about some of the things that he was going through in his life? No?
No. Elton is very private. His entire life in the last 20 years has kind of done a 360, all for the better.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I remember one night at the Garden, Andy Warhol was there. It was just a kind of a strange mix of people, and it was kind of an uneven show. And, I was kind of an uneven at that show too, so I'm not even going to try to dissect it. But, back in the day, we say that, but things were different.
Yeah, much differently. Yeah. Now, as far as the biopic Rocket Man, I really do hope that they pay homage to Scott Manning, because I don't think you have the Elton John story as what it is without Scott.
They should. I remember being at one of those Elton. I think it was EJ the DJ.
EJ the DJ, and EJ is going to read the spot for us.
And EJ was phenomenal.
And Scott loved that. Yeah. One day, Scott decided to really mess with Elton, so he sent one of his producers down to the Village to find some dresses. And they all put on the dresses, so Elton shows up in Scott Manning in drag. He must have looked like Aunt B playing cards or something like that. Right. And Elton just took it all in stride. I just like those kind of stories. And, for me...
He's a very cool guy.
Who, Elton?
Elton. And I'm trying to remember, and I think I was at the one where he had the Esso, jumpsuit on, or the
gas man thing?
Yes.
Yeah,
that everyone apparently wore, and I never had one. But
one thing about Elton, he always puts on a great show. Yeah. So if you ever get a chance
I saw him at the Goodbye show. I was sitting next to Bill and Hillary Clinton. Donna Karen was.
Were you wearing your MAGA hat while sitting next to the Clintons?
No. I was actually with my family and some friends, and it was a phenomenal show.
As a PR guy, if let's say you have a client that might be a little tough for you to manage. Like I was kind of tough, I think, at times for to manage. I could be temperamental, as you know. I don't think here's the facets of this. You have the client, such as myself. Well, because I don't want to talk about other people. Your interaction with me, and I can remember being temperamental, and for a reason. I might not always explain the reason why, but like most of us, there's so much going on, and we get comfortable around certain people. And I would say, and I don't know if this is how you feel about it, but when you have a client who might be temperamental and they're just being themselves in front of you and just really removing the filters, what kind of relationship is that? A healthy way to be in that relationship, or how do you like navigate through that? What's the thought process, and how do you work around that?
Well, first off, I never, ever, ever remember you being temperamental.
Oh no, I could be temperamental.
I'm being honest. And if you were back then, I'm glad I didn't say. Honestly, I have no memory of it. You know, I have in my career only taken on 2 projects when I wondered if I could do anything. There are 2 types of clients. A, the client who will listen to you and follow your advice, or B, client has all the money and all the resources in the world and tells you what to do. So those 2 instances were the second. I've been pretty lucky. We had Run DMC. We worked with Debbie in her heyday. We're working with Mickey Dolenz, who is just a unbelievable personality. We kind of have become friends, but just a brilliant guy. ZZ Top we continued with under the auspices of my company. I use all my resources. I use all my experience. And if I can't genuinely come up with, a plan, I won't be involved.
I understand that. So it's about integrity. It's an integrity issue.
I like to think I still have it, after all these years. The business is crazy.
Well, yeah, it's changed a lot.
I know more people out of the business who used to be in the business now than ever before, and that's sad.
I'll give you my take on that in a second, but what are your thoughts on surviving this business?
I'm 64. I don't
Will you still love me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
Yeah. Everyone wants to give me a recording of that song. I try to stay vital. I'm up 6 a.m. every morning. Most mornings. I go on the internet and I read this and I read that, and I'll go to the radio trades and I'll go to Deadline.
Radio trades, really? There's something left?
Well,
I don't know.
There's All Access,
yeah.
which I think is great. I remember Joel Denver from Radio and Records that I used to do stuff with at London Records. This is going back to the late 70s. How he's been able to survive. That's got to be a story in itself, Inside Radio and Mike Harrison. I still deal with a lot of these people in addition to all the new people. So when I get involved in a new project, I'm trying initially to figure out how to plug, the old school people in with
the new generation, So, I think, and you'll agree with me on this.
Right.
I think the bottom line is loyalty.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, as we've discussed, that's becoming less and less of a commodity, or less and less in play. And that's a shame. I had a jazz group come to me. They put out a series of records on a smaller label. Actually, the label is in this building, believe it or not.
Red Label?
Possibly. And last year, their jazz album was the #1 album in Billboard. Now, the charts don't mean as much as they did 10 years ago. I mean, 10 years ago, if they had a number one album, they'd be playing every day. And they're not. You know, they have a gig here and a gig there. So their record label put together an ad. Thank you, thank you, thank you. At the bottom of the ad, they put seeking representation.
Wow.
And they didn't put the logo of the record company on. You know, no one ran it by me. And I was involved. And my answer was, how come you didn't run it by me? I mean, it was an ad in a fairly prominent industry publication. I mean, we're talking maybe $4 or $5 grand. I mean, it's, you know, if I'm in, I'm all in. I want to be consulted on how they look. I'll tell you a funny story. The first Debbie Gibson album, remember Out of the Blue? She's with the big teddy bear, kneeling. Her jeans are torn. I am at the photo shoot. I helped choose the photographer, and I'm with my wife, who is in the fashion business.
Oh,
and
cool.
Right before we were going to start shooting, my wife said, hang on a second. She went up, took a thing of lipstick, and drew a face on Debbie's knee. It looked great. We had kids 6 months after the record came out coming with the face on their knee.
That's good. That's good stuff. Yeah, you can never underestimate creativity and going into different directions. Or I don't want to use the old thinking outside the box, but I this day and age, you really have to be innovative, and that's overused. I guess creative thinking and it kind of makes you dynamic. Right. You know, you really gotta like spread it out and see what you have before you and use it to your best ability. Now, for me, you know, we've talked about this many times. I'm starting. Here's the bottom line. If anybody's listening right now and you want to be successful in life, there's a couple things going on here. First and foremost, you have to distinguish between who you are and what you do. That's, you know, what you do is a PR guy. That's not who you are. What I do is whatever this is called. But that's what I do. That's not who I am. Content, whatever. I'm intellectually curious. But the other thing that I want to really emphasize, regardless of our age, whether I'm in my mid-50s, you're in your mid-60s, like my older brother, or you're really old, that I'm gonna bring something that is from the Bible. This is my analysis from the Bible. It's not to preach here, but one thing I've noticed, there's not one character in the entire Bible, which is thousands of years old, that has ever retired. They all work until they're dead. And I think that is an important lesson to learn. As long as you have breath and as long as you have your health and as long as you have your faculties, keep going. It's never too late to become successful or to get where you want to go. It's life, like Aerosmith. He said, life's a journey, not a destination, right? What are some of your current projects that you're working on?
Current projects. You know, whenever I'm asked that, all these years later, my mind still is
Elton John, blank. Debbie Gibson. Yeah.
Well, not Debbie. You know, not Elton. You know, Mickey Dolenz, who you know, Davy Jones passed away.
Yeah.
Peter Tork, very sad, passed away in February. Mike and Mickey, Michael Nesmith and Mickey Dolenz have gone out and doing a series of shows. I mean, they were at the Beacon Theater, the Paramount Theater, which is my new favorite theater in Long Island. Just a phenomenal show of deep monkey cuts, deep Michael Nesmith cuts. I've got to be honest, I never got into the Michael Nesmith, you know, the band he had, the name escapes me, something with stars, but the songs he's performing on this tour, especially a song, Joanne, National Star Band, I think.
Whatever.
Just a phenomenal song.
We can get these guys to do this as well and, you know, play some of their songs.
They did a show at the Beacon. I was sitting right next to Brian Williams, not to name drop.
Brian Williams
turns out to be a big Monkees fan.
The anchor?
Yes, MSNBC.
Oh, MSNBC and Brian Williams.
I'm Brian Williams.
You know,
I mean, it was a great show. You know, it's funny. The last show I saw, 2 weeks ago at the Blue Note, Bill Frisell, the guitarist.
Wow.
I mean, in my old age, I'm seeing a lot of jazz. I always like jazz.
Yeah.
You know, I saw Chick Corea not too long ago, who was a regular. Let me say this, at my father's place.
Right.
We always talked, nicest guy in the world. Flash forward maybe 25 years, so I'm at the Blue Note. The guy has not lost anything. And when I went up to him, he remembered me from.
Well, that's good. Well, we got to get him in here too.
Yeah,
I mean,
phenomenal musician.
Here's what I've decided to do for me personally. I have, I lost that syndicated show.
Yeah.
All right, but instead of doing what most radio personalities do, I'm on the beach, and they cry, bitch, and moan. I'm like, all right, I'll just design my own thing. So I came up with this whole Big Fat American thing. I called up a couple of radio stations. One is playing the show KKDJ in Fresno. It's a start. I told the guy who runs that station, I go, all right, when you're ready to do your syndication stuff, you got my loyalty. And in other words, I'm willing to do this for a percentage of what you earn as far as advertising sales. Nobody's willing to do stuff like that anymore. And I think what we all have to do is kind of understand that if you want to still remain viable, you got to learn how to do it on your own with some friends and just keep plugging away. Now, having said that, I also have the creative license to interview a jazz artist, interview Mark Bigo, one of your clients, or whomever it might be, promote them on my on-air show, and guide people over to the website. So we're using the technology to our advantage.
When I work with Howard Bloom, one of my clients who I did not mention was Peter Gabriel. He just
I love
Genesis.
Peter Gabriel. Yeah,
and this guy, much like Mickey Dolenz, just fascinated me. I love the music. I loved talking with him. He was actually dating Rosanna Arquette at the time, and she would, very nice girl. I don't know how much she knew about the music, but Peter Gabriel at that time came out with the record DIY, do it yourself.
Yeah.
Great record.
DIY.
And that motto has always stuck in the back of my head. I mean, when I
DIS is DIY.
Right. It'd be a good ad. But you have to do it for yourself. The other song I'm thinking of, Sisters Doing It for Themselves, maybe a little bit different, but you've got to, I know I have the background, I have the experience, but still, you've got to have the drive. I told you about my apartment. I moved back into my original apartment. I had Spectrum cable over at 8 a.m. a week ago today, and I start talking to the guy, and all of a sudden he looks at me and he says, "You mind if I ask you what line of work you're in? You're awfully outgoing."
Yeah, PR. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, "Oh, now I get it." I mean, PR today versus PR 20 years ago, I mean, there's just more to do.
I think we're back to where we started with that. Because here's the thing. I dabble in PR. You can't do your own PR. Sorry.
I have a question to ask you. When you contacted these people about this podcast, about this broadcast, had they known about it, or were you telling them?
I picked up the phone.
Well, then let me say something to you. I've said before, you need PR.
I know I need PR. I know you're the guy.
Let me volunteer.
Yeah, that's great. I think we got a lot. There's a lot to do.
You have the skills. You have the experience, as do I. It's just the matter of hooking it up the right way.
Well,
you're making it flow.
You're right about. So if you're listening and you're thinking, I want to become a PR agent, which is a great job. It's still we have 300 million plus people in this country. So there's opportunity for anybody. Right. So you have to diversify. That's the thing. You have to reach out in different directions. You've opened your mind to various musical genres. Right. Some guys are only stuck in one genre, and they go, "I'm a rock jock, man. That's all I do." I'm like, no. Right. You got to be a music man. You got to be inquisitive. You have to ask questions. People of all different backgrounds, they can come to the table because everybody's got something to say. But here's what I've been thinking in my mind. I'm forming a media company, and I'm going to start small. And, I was thinking about, I remember David telling me many times he had to form his own little company. I'm like, I'm probably at that phase right now. I don't know where it's going to lead, but there's a bigger mission involved. And what I want to do is create a company that employs people that live on the spectrum, people that can't get out of their house. Because now we have the technological ability where you might be introverted, but a great writer, and nobody knows about you. Right. Well, through my little network of friends, we can find these young people, these young adults who want meaningful work. I'll use an example of my own daughter for a second. She was, you get kind of, I don't want to say the word programmed, but it's the only thing I can come up with to couch it properly. You get programmed in school, like you got to, study, you got to do your work, and we're going to train you for jobs, and you're going to get a job, and, you earn money for the job, and blah, 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 blah. So my daughter graduated high school last year, and she kept goofing around with the list of jobs she wanted. Well, that was, as a parent, we have to you got to pay attention to what your kids are telling you. So it was around December, and I go, Sophie, do you want a job? Yeah. I go, how about if you become the social media manager for Big Fat American? Do I have to interview? I'm like, no, my daughter. But here's what it entails. She
has the inside track.
Right. And so it grew from that, and I noticed a big change in her, like the light switch. And that said to me, like, there's a whole bunch of kids that also would probably benefit from this kind of activity or employment. So, it grew out of that. So that's my reasoning behind that. And I want to make a place for artists on all different levels, whether they're emerging, I'll talk to them and try to help them out and give them a voice, or established, right? Or you have a guy who might be part of a bigger band like the Rolling Stones.
Right.
And they're trying to break out on their own. Or, Mickey Dolenz for another example. And they're going in different directions, but the regular radio stations, whether they be satellite or terrestrial, they're not giving these guys any shot whatsoever. I think that's where I'm going to fill a void, where I'm going to give these people a shot, and I'm going to help them out. And then, in my mind, raise money for various causes, do that, and then have a concert series that will raise more money for people that live on the spectrum. So it's going to give people an eventual opportunity, and I'm just using the things that God has given me to make the most out of it. Right. I'm not going to say that everything I do is going to be successful, but I can no longer, at this point, much like you, and then I'll let you follow up, I can no longer put my destiny in the hands of other people or companies.
Well, I supported 100%, although I must say that when I started my company, I started it out of my apartment in 1984. And little by little, I grew. I think it's harder today to start something like that, but I think it's definitely doable. One day I was with my daughter, this a long time ago, and I said to her, do you want to get in the business? I said, maybe I should leave you my company. And there was a long pause, and she looked at me and she said, your clients are too much work. Now, my daughter went to school for like graphic design, putting websites together, and 2 years ago got a position at one of the top firms like that in New York. They work all over the world.
Right.
There's still some issues to be worked out, but I mean, she got her job and she worked really hard at it. PR is great. I think that if you want to get into it, I can only say just be very aggressive, seek out the leaders in the field. I mean, there are a lot of PR firms around. I mean, there's PR for furniture companies, and there's PR for radio stations. I had a situation, you mentioned Mark Bigo before. He's done a book with a fellow who owns all these hotels.
Right.
And when he introduced me to him, I said to Mark, make sure he takes a look at our website. And Mark Bigo said to me, and no one ever said this to me before, and I, I'm glad that he did, but he said, I think your website is a little too rock and roll.
What?
I mean, I
get it. Yes, I understand what he means. Yes.
It's hard. I mean, it's a hard business to get into. There's a lot of competition. But just be aggressive and seek out the leaders in the field.
That's good advice. Are you going to write a book? How to How to be
I've been asked.
A genius like Dave?
Danny Goldberg just did a book. Danny Goldberg used to have a PR company, and before I went to work for Howard, interviewed me in his apartment on the floor. We sat on the floor, and I don't know what happened. It didn't work out, but, he went on to work with Nirvana. He went on to work at Swan Song and Led Zeppelin. Really nice guy. And his book 2 weeks ago was number 8 on the New York Times bestseller list.
So,
Serving the Servant.
There's that. Okay.
Me and Kurt,
That's great.
But there's PR today. You're talking about social media, you're talking about advertising. Yeah, I was going to say before, Debbie Gibson still is the only artist that has ever invited me to come down to a mix session. I wanted to be a musician. I play guitar. I know how a recording studio works. But sometimes, you think the PR guy doesn't. You got to bring the whole team down.
Yeah.
That phrase, bring my team down.
Look, that's very intuitive for Debbie to do, because when you're trying to move forward, when you're trying to build your empire, if you want to call it that, the key people have to understand what the blood, sweat, and tears looks, sounds, and feels like and smells like. So having you in the studio gives you perspective. So if you're listening right now and you're putting your team together, be inclusive, because that's the way this is leadership 101. This is how you build people. This is how you build a team. This is how you get people all in on it.
Yeah. In the olden days, 20, 30 years ago.
Many moons ago.
The PR guy would never come down to a mix session. The engineer, the producer. But now, because so many good people have gone, if you find a good person, work with him, run everything by him. Like this record company with the ad. Why they wouldn't run the ad by me, seeking management? You have a number 1 record.
What's up with that?
It's kind of weird.
Well, there's a lot of weirdness going on. Yeah. Now, if someone wanted to get a hold of David Salidor, how do they do that?
Well, www.davidsalidor.com.
It's a real rockin' website.
Yeah, it's too rock and roll.
It's a rock and roll.
Before you look at it, but, we still do a lot
Broadway
stuff,
Really? I love Broadway stuff. Can't get enough of Broadway.
Yeah, it's, it's very Broadway. I must say, this Fosse Verdon miniseries on FX.
Like that?
I'm a huge Sam Rockwell fan. I have been for decades. One of the best performances I've ever seen. They kind of nail it. Debbie was in Beauty and the Beast. She did Cabaret. She did Chicago. Donnie Kerr has been in Billy Elliot. And he has a foundation called Rockers on Broadway. And every November, they celebrate a show, or they celebrate this. Last November, he calls me. He said, we're going to have Pete Townsend there. He was in Tommy, the Who's Tommy, with Pete Townsend. And I'm thinking to myself, this is great. I'm going to remind him of the Lido Beach thing. So we get there. I start to talk to him. He claims he has no memory of it. He's a smart guy.
In all fairness, there's a photo of me with the Scorpions from 1989.
Ken Dashow's favorite group.
Well, I
love the Kirk Hammett impersonation he does.
All I could
Metallica.
All I could tell you is
over enunciation.
I don't remember that night.
Yeah.
There's the photo. I have no idea where that was, or where it was, or what was going on around me.
But you were told you had a good time.
From what when you look at the pictures, I obviously had a good time. I just don't remember it. Could have been.
I remember you and I actually have a photo on my wall when we went to see Neil Young. We went backstage.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And we walked in, and what is Neil Young doing? He's having a bowl of granola,
and I'm like, I'm more of the conservative bent, and I'm looking at him like, of course, you're eating granola and freaking yogurt, hugging a tree before you go on stage.
It was a great show. It was Greendale.
That was Greendale. And I thought it was amazing. Me too. A lot of people didn't like it, but I was like, no, this is really good. It was, it was a great album. Yep. I think to this day, the record rep is like, wow, I'm glad you liked it, because, I got the most positive response. Neil Young is working on a new album. Let's see what else is going on in the world of rock. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's still an exciting time. everybody's getting a little bit older, but I don't think anybody's really slowing up.
Right.
It's a very exciting time to be part of the action.
Didn't Dave Mason, and I see that CD there, which I always wanted, I never got. He said, "Age is just a number."
That's right.
Dave's
he just
an
celebrated.
Old pirate, but it was a great line.
He just celebrated his birthday on May 10th, same day that Scott Muni was born.
Really?
He's out in Hawaii when he's not on the road.
Right. Isn't he in Ojai now? I think they relocated to Ojai.
I don't know exactly where he lives, but I think to this day there might be a Mick Fleetwood in the mix. I don't know how it happens, but Dave and I keep in constant contact. Dave is working with another charity organization that raises money for veterans, so that's near and dear to him.
What's it? Vessels, right? Something?
Rock Our Vets or something like that. Yeah.
I had a funny thing happen with Dave Mason after we stopped working together. I was actually going to put together one of these Woodstock anniversary events with Steve Walter at the Cutting Room, owns the Cutting Room, good friend of mine. And Dave was the first person we called. We set a deal, and somehow the deal fell apart. And to this day, Dave holds me and probably Steve Walter. I mean, it was just one of those things.
I think that at this point, Dave doesn't even remember, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Well,
he might.
It's very exciting. We met him on the bus, in the. But it's, I felt bad because I'm a huge fan.
I'm going to tell you this: Dave does not hold grudges. Only small people hold grudges.
Okay,
that's all. That's all I'll say about that. But it's great having you here. We'll have you here again.
Okay,
because I'm sure that there's stuff that we're gonna miss in this one.
We just scratched the surface.
Is it? The iceberg only shows you a little bit of the top, but it's gigantic.
Just give everyone a taste.
Yeah, exactly.
The first taste is free.
The second one's going to call. Oh, all right. Well, great. Fantastic. So we're all going to make money on this one. Well, thank you for stopping by.
Okay, Zach. Thank you.